What does the future hold in the coming year? What simple things can you do in your business to be prepared for what could happen, to be more resilient? We're all aware of the importance of building resilience in our lives, but making sure your business is resilient is also important. Luckily, you can build your business resilience in ways that will benefit all areas of your business. Over the last few years, I've spent quite a time dealing with unexpected shocks, sometimes crises. We all know too well how an unexpected event can hit a business and cause disruption. The pandemic is obvious, but there are power outages, floods, or even a cyber attack on your business. There are wider issues, problems from suppliers or customers, such as if you unexpectedly lose a key customer, or even problems on social media or e-commerce problems. Even if you're a small company with limited resources, there are things that you can do which will help you manage and survive disruption. The tips I will give here can be used more generally in running your business. For example, if there are problems with social media, if a key customer is unhappy, and so on. So yes, there are areas where specialist help is useful, such as keeping your IT or your data secure, but you can achieve a lot by building on what you already do in your business. Why is resilience important to us all? Obviously, if you run a company, you want to be able to keep it going and bounce back more quickly after disruption. But there is a wider benefit to society more generally, which is that small businesses account for a substantial turnover of the UK economy. During the pandemic, the resilience of small companies was very important to help keep the country running. Within Reigate Banstead, the majority of businesses employ less than 9 people. In the UK, small businesses turn over nearly 50% of the overall business economy. So when small businesses are resilient, the UK as a whole becomes more resilient. However, the focus for many aspects around business resilience is large companies. Guidance and support to small companies and sole traders is very limited and jargon-filled. Often the message seems to be that you need detailed skills and detailed resources to do this. But you don't, and there is a lot you can do using the knowledge and skills that you have in running a business. So what is resilience? The definition I use is on the screen, the ability to bounce back after disruption. But you'll find lots of other similar definitions. The key point is that being good at resilience builds your capabilities in other areas and it's got a benefit to your business as a whole. Here are some of the components that make up resilience in a business context. The importance of resilience and well-being of individuals at the workplace is finally being recognised, and financial resilience is obvious. Another component is how the business is run itself, the processes, the equipment you use. And don't forget your reputation. A well-regarded company can survive a major crisis more effectively. Looking at these subjects, you see that we could spend at least a day covering these subjects, if not longer, but I've only another 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to focus on those areas that I'm most familiar with, that's business processes. And I'll give you 4 tips that you can apply when disruption is threatened or in fact happens. The tips aren't detailed things you need to do, rather they should help you frame how you will respond. In particular, help embed this thinking into everyday regular work. In fact, I think most people out there will already do some of the tips I'm about to give. That's good because it shows that actually resilience can be embedded easily without large cost or a large amount of specialist support. This is the first tip, and it is the most important and possibly the most obvious. The biggest resilience asset you have is the way you work, and if people work for you, how they work. If you're flexible in your mindset and the way that you work, then that is the biggest thing that you can do to help in a crisis. Now, the big advantage that small businesses have is that much of the flexibility necessary to run a business is already there, and many of you will already use this. So, the first tip is to use the skills you already have and be confident that you can use them. To give a little bit more detail, the components of what I call flexibility are up there on the screen and should be familiar to everyone who has thought about how a good business works. The things written up there are familiar from many courses on business. Key is probably leadership, but giving people the knowledge and skills so they can do their job and letting them do it. And encouraging people to have a shared purpose why they are doing it, and the confidence to be able to take on new roles and think for themselves. If you haven't already done this, embed this within the business you have, and you've taken a big step, perhaps the biggest, to get resilient. None of this requires expert knowledge of areas such as information security or business continuity, just the typical things that happen every day in a good business. The next tip is also something that you will already do. Another component of resilience you have in your business, even if you didn't realise it. You understand your business, I expect in great detail. This means understanding everything that you do to make the business successful. You use materials. What equipment do you use, even if you just use a computer and a phone? Equally important are the people who you work with, either in your business or suppliers and customers. Finally, what timescales does everything take place in? Whatever you do for your customers, how much leeway do you have in the delivery time? If you're dependent on suppliers, how much delay could you tolerate from them? This timing is crucial. If you need to deal with the disruption immediately, that will usually cost you a lot more money than if you realise you have a bit more time to deal with the situation. If you understand your business so you know what you need to do and when, you also have a big plus for your resilience. I won't be using business jargon, apart from at this point. This slide is actually key to understanding business continuity, and the information here is known as a business impact analysis. You don't need to call it that, but the more you understand the detail of what you need to do, the easier it will be to come up with some solutions when something goes wrong, as we shall see in subsequent tips. This slide covers the things you may actually need to worry about. Reading through the media, you'll probably find a large number of things that could cause disruption, although of course many of them won't. I've listed some of them here just to give you an idea. There's flooding, pandemics, space weather, or a power cut. And in fact, the risk of cyber attack in your business is very high and should be considered by all businesses. So those pictures show some of the things that could potentially go wrong. But even for companies with lots of time and money, it is very difficult to work out the risk by determining exactly what could happen and how likely it is. For example, how long will a power cut be? The average in the UK is about 45 minutes. But how widespread and what will the impacts be? The best approach you can take in most cases is simply to think about the outcomes of what could happen. What disruption would I experience if I couldn't get into the office, if my IT was down, if I couldn't deliver any products to my customers, and things like that. The key consideration you need to take is the balance between the cost of doing something and the potential cost of doing nothing. An average successful cyber attack on a micro business can cause up to £8,000 of loss. But you probably don't want to spend tens of thousands to mitigate such an attack. But then again, spending nothing is not a good idea either. This next tip starts to talk about what you can do when things start to go wrong and disruption occurs. Follow the simple procedure, so what? By that I mean, when something happens, so what actually is the problem? What has happened? Ask yourself, what exactly has happened? Do you need to find out more? Then ask, well, what does this mean for me? Given your knowledge of your business, you should be able to start identifying exactly what the implications are for your business. If it's a 24-hour power cut, is that a disaster or a minor problem? It's about losing access to your IT. So what will it immediately impact? What can you pretty much continue doing okay at the moment, but you'll need to deal with soon? Or can you get away with not doing anything at all? Again, your business knowledge, particularly of timescales, will help you here. Then think about whether it could get any worse. And think about your business again and how it could impact you using your knowledge of how your business works. And now you're able to work out what you need to do next. And then finally, you'll need to tell people, but not everyone at once necessarily. If the disruption means you can't deliver to one customer as promised by 5 p.m, you'll probably want to tell them. But if the delivery hasn't been promised till next week, do you need to tell anyone at the moment? Do you need to speak to suppliers yet? And do you need to tell any other people who work in your company? Another important point here about telling people is to make sure the information is consistent and is as correct as far as you know. Nothing will harm your reputation more than someone ringing a customer, followed by someone else ringing that same customer 20 minutes later to tell them something different. Ideally, get one person to do this and make sure that everything that is said is agreed and written down. And don't forget about things such as social media in this. If your business relies on social media for promotion or selling, then problems in that area should be considered as well. Not just the obvious things such as inability to access social media, but what if your reputation starts to get trashed online by a disgruntled customer? The steps outlined above here can be used in that situation. In fact, they can be used for wider business problems, such as finding that you've got a potential financial problem. My fourth tip around disruption actually takes place before the disruption occurs. And again, hopefully should be something that you already do a lot of. Planning, monitoring, reviewing. Planning for disruption doesn't mean lots and lots of detailed plans, but if you can find the time to think about things before they happen, please do. It's a good idea to have your business activities captured in one place so you can refer to them when trying to work out how to deal with disruption. Always monitor and review what's happening. Can you identify problems with suppliers before it becomes obvious? Another thing to look for is an early warning. That is, that a number of small problems may start occurring that in themselves haven't caused any major disruption, but are they indications that things are about to start going wrong big time? If you've got a number of people in your business, have you considered a desktop exercise? Just get everyone around a table and ask them how the business would continue in an example of disruption. For example, how would the business continue during a power cut? How would that affect your business? If you then increase the severity, how would the business deal with that? These desktop exercises are simple to do and very effective at finding out issues very quickly. If you are confident about knowing your business, there are already things you can do now to help with the issues raised in tip 3. In a major disruption, you'll need to deal with it quickly, making sure all the information you need is now at hand. This includes contact details of important stakeholders, such as your customers, your suppliers, your landlord. Keep your insurance and bank details to hand, and people you may need in an emergency, such as legal or financial help, IT suppliers or utility companies, such as the website to get details of a power cut. List alternative suppliers and details of any things you would buy in during a disruption. And make sure that you have contact details of any staff that you may need to call in an emergency. Remember, let them know that you plan to do this and get their agreement to do this and check when it would be possible to ring them. When you consider how you would deal with specific incidents, then you start to enter the realm of business continuity, which again is another day's worth of talks. But there are a few pointers to frame the sort of way you could deal with an incident. Here are some common responses. Firstly, duplicate. Simplistically, this means having more than one of something. This is usually a strategy adopted by large companies and is needed when a disruption will have an immediate and sudden impact. For example, power companies have duplicate control rooms they can use if one is out of action. However, you may feel the need to stockpile key materials, for example. Second is to diversify, and for a small business, this would be making sure that you are not reliant on a single point of failure, but in an emergency, you could use a similar piece of equipment, or get someone else to do the job, even if they're not as proficient. Hopefully, a lot of this is obvious, but don't rely on a single person. Make sure that other people understand how they could do enough to allow work to continue. Third strategy is to buy in. This is a strategy that is useful in some circumstances. So when you are hit by disruption, then purchase equipment, or purchase resources, for example, get them from a temping agency, or purchase other materials to help deal with the disruption. For example, I regularly back up my information and I don't have a spare laptop. If it suddenly dies on me, then I will buy a new one and can be up and running again in a couple of hours. Fourth strategy is wait and see. So do you fully understand the implications of the disruption on your business? If so, you might see that there's been no immediate impact on your work. So you can monitor the situation and put something in place in enough time to deal with any disruption if it does occur. Finally, where you can find out some more information. The address of my website is up there on screen. Have a look at that. There's a free webinar on business continuity available and some downloads with infographics going into more detail on resilience. And you can also find links for my book, Open for Business, which goes into much more detail about business continuity and resilience and is available in paperback and in Kindle. And if you're interested in getting more information about the sort of threats and hazards that we face, local community risk registers are a good idea and will give you all the information about local risks. Likewise, the National Risk Register is published every 2 years by the government. That contains a lot more detail about risks themselves and is worth reading if you want to try and understand what are the risks that we face. And another source to look is local councils. So here's the Reigate Banstead local council website, and there's quite a lot of information there on business continuity. So have a look at all things like that, or just try Googling business continuity or resilience.